Welcome back to Creepy Kitty Creations. Oh my gosh, I could not believe it when I saw that it had been over a year since my last full doll video. So I'm really happy to say that I've got something super exciting today. It's my first 17-inch Monster High doll, which is much larger than I had expected and became a much bigger project than I originally thought. So it will be in two parts today. And we'll be making Enid from season 2 of Wednesday because I saw her outfit and I just had to make her. I knew it. And like that season was even better than the first season. You know what? I really, really love that part when. What? What? No. Ah! Don't move her! Ah! Enid has kindly reminded me that this will be a spoiler-free video, so I make sure I'm only going to focus on the clothes, I promise. So no worries, I won't spoil anything for those of you who still haven't seen it. Now without any further ado, let's get started. First, we're going to take our 17-inch tall Draculara, which I was so happy when I saw her on Facebook Marketplace. I couldn't get her fast enough. She's generally very good. She doesn't, her chest joint's a little bit loose, but other than that, she's perfect. So I'm going to wipe her face off with acetone first. And use this little pointy spongy Q-tip to try and get right into the lips. Those are always the most annoying, but I managed to get it all. Now the fun part, we're going to cut off all of her hair. Usually I take the head off dolls and I don't need to crop it quite so short, but these giant dolls, their heads, the vinyl is so thick that I can't even attempt to take the head off, so I'm trying to cut this down as much as I can so that I can cut the head open. Yeah. Dust that all off. And I've got my X-Acto blade and we'll try and cut her head open so I can rip all the hair out from the inside. And I tell you what, this was so difficult. I mean, look, the X-Acto blade's just sticking straight up because of how thick this vinyl is. It was so hard to cut. Oh, come on. It's starting to spin so that the blade falls out. You know how you spin it to tighten it, and every time I wiggle it, it comes undone. Using a little bit of a sawing motion has helped a little bit. It's kind of cutting it, but I can feel I can so easily just, this is gonna slip and I'll end up cutting myself, so this is gonna be tricky. Slow and steady is winning the race. Very slow. This looks really precarious and I can totally see myself cutting my hand there, so I try and move it out of the way. But I've sped this up so that you don't have to go quite as slowly as I am, but this actually took at least an hour. And here we go. All open and ready to rip some of that hair out, which was even harder than cutting it open. Unlike the old Monster High dolls, it doesn't have glue, but I still dunked her in some boiling water to see if I could soften her hair, because this was an absolute mission. But with some help from my mum as well, we took turns and we eventually got it all out, but it took about 2 or 3 days. So now I'm taking some adhesive. I don't have super glue. I usually prefer super glue, but I ran out and I couldn't find some more, so I'm just using this all-purpose glue to stick her head back together. So I'm just holding it there, and I had to wait ages, but it eventually dried. So now I can start the wig cap, which I'm just going to do the way I always do, but if you're new here, this is the whole process. So I get some plastic wrap and put it over her head, And then I like to use these little rubber bands like what you use for your braces, and I try and hook it over her ear, and then I take another one and I put it over that elastic band to keep it in place. That way you get it nice and fitting around the ears. So then I'm going to take my pantyhose fabric and do the exact same thing. Fasten it around the doll's head and then do that same elastic band trick, but I try and get all the wrinkles. It's better for them to be at the front because that part of near the face is going to get cut out anyway, so you want it as straight as possible at the back. And then I'm just using some fabric glue, gluing over top, and I think I do about 5 or 6 layers of this throughout the day. There we go, so we just wait for this one to dry and then I'll do 5 more layers. Okay, so that's all dry now, so I'm going to put some more plastic wrap over her head, and yes, I know, her clothes are finished here. It's a bit of a continuity error. I don't work in a linear way most of the time. I'm a bit erratic, and I actually prefer doing the clothes first for most dolls. So I'm just masking that off here, but I promise I'm going to show you how I did it later in the video. But I wanted to paint her wig cap because the hardest part of this project at this point was actually finding yarn that matched her hair. Like, it's a lovely, it looks pastel pink in the show, but it's actually more like a pastel pinky purple. Like, everything else I could find was either too purple, too grey, or too pink, so it was really hard to find the right one. So I ended up painting the wig cap way too dark and it didn't suit, so I'm doing it a few shades lighter here, and then I actually do a couple more layers later. So while I wait for that to dry, I started doing the tights, just using some old pantyhose and then just sticking them on her and sewing up the inseam like that. So now that's all dry, we're going to make her chemise, which is that little top t-shirt part there. So I did that off camera. Unfortunately, I lost some of that film. But it's not quite fitting how I would like it to fit. I want it to be quite tight fitting there, so I've just sort of added some tucks and pleats that I'm going to hand sew to bring that in a bit tighter, and I added some beads and loops so that the top can do up quite easily there. So I'm just going to stitch those now off camera. There we go, and I added a bit of Velcro because that part's not going to be seen, but the part behind her you can see, so I wanted it to look pretty, which is why I did these little bead fastenings. And it doesn't impede her movement either, which is perfect. I really thought that it was going to be a bit too constricting, but she can move fine, which is good because she's got a dance to do. Then it's the skirt. Finding the right colour was so hard because everything was either too white or too cream or not quite pink enough, so I ended up using 2 different layers, and I stitched that onto this ribbon waistband, which I end up not using because it doesn't fit. I don't know what it is with me and waistbands, but I seem to get them wrong every single time. So I've included it here so you can see how I do them as far as neatening the ends. But I do actually end up changing into a fabric waistband later. And it looks like I just lost a bunch of audio from this next bit while I was editing, so pardon the change of mic quality since I've had to re-record it, but I'm just gather stitching the tulle here. This is the white layer, but I'll do the same to that pinkish layer and just gather it around her waist, like so. I kept the tulle really long so I could just cut it all to the same length later. So I made this fabric waistband off camera, so I'm just stitching it to the white tulle. So then I can now take the pink tulle layer and sort of sandwich it between the white layer and the waistband so that it's not too chunky. And now I've already hemmed that waistband, so now I can fold it over and stitch across to get a really nice neat finish. Now it's time to add some snaps, or in New Zealand we call them domes. So I just find those positions with some pins, and I always place the ones that go into the bottom part, so then I can, because they'll always go on the edge here, and then I can figure out where I want the insert part to go later. Like this, I just sort of pull it as tight as I want it and then mark it with some pins so I know where to stitch on the insert domes. I trimmed the tulle off camera because I needed someone else to hold the doll while I cut to get it all even. It was a bit of a nightmare, but it wasn't quite shiny or magical enough, so I found this kind of iridescent fabric to add to it. Now it looks a little bit plasticky, fake Halloween costumey, and it frays like the absolute dickens, so I'm having to neaten it with some glue. But I think if I sandwich it between the white layer and the pink layer, I think it should look really nice. But first I'm just measuring out what wire I'll need for the hip holster pannier things, just because I don't want to make the skirt too puffy and have it not fit properly later. So I'm just quickly doing that now. Now I can gather stitch this iridescent fabric now that the glue's dry. And stitch it in between the pink and white layer, just so it's not too hardcore. I just want to tone it down a bit so it doesn't look quite as costumey and just has the same sort of iridescence that I want to have on the corset. Looking good, it's so much better this way. Let's just zoom out there and some, excuse me for the reindeer, there's a secret project head up there that I forgot was in shot, so now I can trim it to the same length as the tulle, and then I didn't have anyone to hold the doll while I cut out the triangles, and I found it a bit easier while the doll was lying down. So once I've cut it to the right length, I'm just going to sort of lie her down and cut out these little triangle shapes to get that jaggy look at the hem. Which brings us to the bane of my existence, the pannier that she has on either hip. These are sort of like hip holsters that they used to wear under clothing, especially in the Elizabethan era, to get that really exaggerated hip shape. But they've modded it up on Wednesday, and a lot of them are wearing them externally as a fashion statement, and by golly, do they look fabulous. I'm gluing these together with hot glue because I didn't know how else to attach them, but even with hot glue it was a wee bit tricky because they just kept wanting to fall apart. But I got there in the end, and it's pretty sturdy now. So I'm just going to test that, see how it's sitting, and yeah, it's still sitting the way that I want it to. So I'll continue with the lace. How to attach this was really difficult. I swear I stared at images of this pannier for hours, trying to figure out how to attach this lace, how to get the fabric, and how to just attach it to the wire. It's, yeah, again, one of those things that I think is much easier at human scale, where you'd make actual boning channels out of fabric, but I don't know, I couldn't wrap my brain around doing that at this scale. So I kind of made up my own weird way of doing it. So I've done it in 2 pieces, which I just whip stitch around it by hand. And I did that off camera because it was really fiddly, but I'm still trying to completely puzzle this out at this stage. But this is what it looks like at the end. And I did that top piece in a separate piece, and I stitched it on after the main bit of lace was stitched on, and then I repeated it for the second one. I think this took me over a week, but they're looking pretty good. I'm happy with how they came out, but they are obviously not the right colour. They're white when I need them to be that sort of dusky pink. So I'm mixing some fabric paint together, and I'm just sort of going to lightly brush it on. I'm going to add some water because I want it to be a bit watery. I don't want it to go all crunchy or be too saturated. So I'm mixing it with water and adding it to the lace, while also sort of dabbing it with a rag just to get off any of that excess paint. So obviously this is a spoiler-free zone, so nothing about the plot, but I don't know about you, but the scene that has this costume in it, I've rewatched about 10-20 times because it's just so cool. It's probably my favourite scene out of the entire series. And not just Enid's costume as well, but the costumes for all the characters were absolutely stunning. Honestly, I wish I could make them all. Apparently, the main scene that Enid's in, there is a dance, and apparently they only learnt it in like 3 days, which is insane because it's just awesome. If you haven't seen it yet, look forward to it. You'll love it. Now that that paint's all dry, it's just a lovely sort of off-white, sort of pinky colour. And I've had this holographic paint for ages and never had anything to use it for. If you can see closely, it's got a little bit of glitter in it, but it's also got some shimmery, I don't know if it's paper or if it's just like big chunks of glitter, but it's so pretty, and I just think it will bring these to the next level. So I'm just gonna brush some on. Oh, see, look at that shimmer in the light. I think it will go really nice with that layer of the holographic fabric under her skirt. See, doesn't that just look lovely? I'm so happy with it, but when it dries, it's actually quite flaky, so I'm doing a coat of matte varnish over the top just to seal in those glitter flakes, because I can just see them all disappearing. So I'm just doing a generous coat of that, and it stiffened the pannier, which I'm not too mad about. But now I just need to add some of the ribbon. There we go. Also took about 2 days hand sewing that. Sorry if you can hear Luna crying in the background, she's constantly wanting treats. Now there's also a bit of ribbon that goes down the middle all the way over and around, so I'm just planning that out. I want it to get the right length where it just goes over and tucks under, so I'm going to glue it with some fabric glue to keep it in place. I was originally going to sew it, but because the matte varnish made the lace quite hard, I think it would have been too difficult to sew on by hand, and I didn't want to see any sewing lines, so I opted for gluing this time, which I don't usually do, but I think it is a much nicer finish. Use some bull clips to keep it in place, and start gluing down the front. This part took quite a while because it didn't really want to stay flat, so I sort of had to hold it down there and wait. So now I can sort of test it to see how it looks, because the ribbon needs to come up a bit because I need it to attach to another waistband that will get hidden by the corset. So now there's 2 ribbons going either side of that center one if you look really closely at Enid's costume, so I wanted to try and do that as accurately as I could, but obviously being at doll size and being a slightly different shape than the human version of the costume, this was a little bit tricky because there's not quite as much real estate, so I had to wing it a bit and do some tucks to get it going off in the right direction. But eventually it did, and the glue took ages to dry. I've put in some pins to keep it in place. So now it's just neatening all the little bits of ribbon, because a lot of these hang loose, which is part of the charm of the outfit, I think. So I'm just gluing those extra ones on the inside of the pannier where they won't be seen. And I want this one to sit a particular way, so I add a little bit of extra glue and do a little tuck so that it will drape the way I want it to. And I repeat it on the second one, and those are done. Well, the first basic parts. Now I'm going to trim those ribbons just to the point where I measured where it will go up onto the waistband. Like so. The skirt is still a little bit poofy, but these actually help rein that in so that we get that lovely, almost squarish bell shape. So now I have to attach them to the waistband, which I just made out of ribbon, actually the one that was supposed to be for the skirt, so it didn't go to waste. I measured those and stitched those on. You know me, I will always favour stitching because it just feels so much more sturdy. But this took a little bit of fandangling to get them to sit in the right place. But eventually they did. Like so. So now I just want to add some more of the wee ribbons, because she has a lot of them dangling down from, some of them look like they come down from the pannier, and others look like they're coming down from the inside of the corset. So I don't want to go too ham on this. I originally did quite a lot of them, and then by the time I did the corset, it was way too much. But there's also these 2 sections at the front and the back that they tie together, which is how the pannier gets fastened. Although at this stage I only saw them at the front, I didn't realise that she had them on the back as well until I watched the clip again. So I'm going to add those to the back now. There we go. Now I also made some roses to add onto the pannier, and I really wanted to quickly show you these now, because if you read my community post, this is actually the last thing I did before putting the video up, so I'm madly trying to film putting these roses on, which you'll see how I make those when we do the corset. But my phone, which I use to film, has decided to go on vacation early, and it doesn't want to record anything anymore. It keeps crashing and it's an absolute nightmare, so I'm just trying to get this done quickly so you can see what they look like in this video instead of having to wait for the next one, because my phone decided to be stupid. And yeah, that's also why I had to put the video out in 2 parts, because I can't film a face up on a phone that can't even process 5 minutes of film. But this is how they're looking. I need to make a few more, but I'm just sort of fastening those in with these decorative pins, and then obviously I'll glue them properly onto the pannier, but then I'll cut the pins and secure them with some super glue. So now we can move on to the corset, which I'm using some lovely silk, that same iridescent fabric and the same lace as the pannier. This pattern I actually patterned out. It's the first thing I did on this project. As soon as I finished that episode, I started patterning out this, rather than a corset, I guess you'd call them stays. But as you can see, with the 3 layers of fabric really get in the way, although I've also put some interfacing in the centre to make it sturdier, because it just didn't sit like a corset. But the lace has the same problem as the pannier, and it's too white. So I'm doing the same thing and going over it with some pinker fabric paint. That's a lot better, I think. Just not quite as stark. It looked way too white with the rest. And I did the same on the other side, and it's looking so much better. A much better match to the panniers, which means I can now pin the layers in place just so they stay put. And I can start patterning out the lining, which I'm also going to use out of the silk. That's all cut out and matching nicely, so with right sides together, pin that in place. Right sides together, yeah, almost sewed it the wrong way. And I just want to stitch down those finished ends there so that we get a nice, neat finish. Like so. And pin those in place, and now for the boning. Yes, I'm including boning. So I need to sew the boning channels where I can use some teeny tiny little zip ties as corset boning. Don't they look funny? Just sticking out. They got caught on everything. They fit nicely, but it was a bit of a pain. Put those down the sides there to give some stability for the lacing. And I tried to do this as accurately as possible to her actual costume, but again, because it's quite different in human size to this size, it wasn't possible to do it completely accurately. But now I can do the eyelets. So I'd done some of those off camera because I did it a very hard way, and then I found out the way you're supposed to do them, which is using the awl. You poke your hole where you want your eyelet, and then you take your eyelet, and what I was doing before is I was just trying to push them straight through here, which of course took a long time because the fabric kept moving and it couldn't find the hole properly. So I found out I've been doing eyelets the difficult way for my entire crafting career. So what you're supposed to do after making the hole is you put the eyelet on the awl and then you push it through the hole, and if you keep pushing hard enough it will actually pop through the way it's supposed to. So that will look like this, and sometimes it does take a little bit of force, especially when the fabric's quite thick. And there we go. See how you can see the end of it and it's popped through? So then usually the eyelet will be stuck on the awl then, so I use a pair of pliers to try and carefully push it off the awl without pushing it out of the fabric. Like so. Much easier. This made the process so much quicker. And then you take your little tool there, you put it on the right side of the eyelet because that's just going to hold it in place. It's got a little needle point in the middle. And then I take this wee star tool and a hammer. You'll need to use a fair amount of force. And the reason I've got the block of wood there is that whatever you hammer onto, it's going to leave a dent. So I just use a blank block of wood to avoid damaging anything. So now you've got this little star shape, but as you can see it's really sticky outy and pointy. So then you just take your hammer and just hammer those down and you'll get a nice neat eyelet. Like this. Now to do it a million more times. And here we are. So they look really dark. Sadly I didn't have any other colours, so I'll be painting them later. But the shape of the top of the corset isn't quite the right shape, and I still need to have those little round bits at the bottom, so I'm just going to cut those to look like this. And I'm not going to worry too much about the pencil marks because it's all going to get trimmed with ribbon all around the outside here and all around the top and over the boning channels like this. So many pins. There we go, there they are, sewn off camera. And I kept the boning channel ribbon loose because I want to glue those down so that I don't have any visible sewing threads, and because the boning's already in place. I couldn't really stitch it because the ribbon's not quite wide enough, but then the next size up was too thick, so I figured gluing down's just easier. I love how you can tell how long I've spent on this based on how often my nail polish changes. This is closer to Halloween, so I've got some cute little ghost ooky spooky nails. But they changed several times because I started working on her in September. That's when season 2 came out, and I started working on her immediately. So she's taken more than 3 months because technically I haven't finished her yet. I still have to do her face up. So keep an eye for the changing nails. I don't know about you guys, but having my nails painted and looking cute is just my instant serotonin. It just makes me happy. One of life's small pleasures. Now for the roses, like I've got on the pannier, she's got some on her corset as well, and I couldn't find the right colour lace, so I'm just painting white lace that I had in my stock box with some iridescent blue paint that I added with some shimmery white paint. So just like with the pannier, I'm adding water to just dilute it a bit because I don't want it to be too, well, for lack of a better word, crusty. You know, when paint dries on fabric and it just makes it really, really crusty and hard, and I don't want that for these because I have to twirl them into roses. I made a short on how with details on how to make these little roses, so So I'm just including that here because I've got all the instructions in it as well. So I used that iridescent fabric as well because the plain lace didn't quite look like what she had on her corset in the show. It still looked like it had that lovely shimmer, so I thought I'll just add some of that iridescent fabric, and it frays like the dickens, so I almost think that will add to the charm. So you just sort of stack them on top of each other like this. Trim any excess, and if you use a needle with a very big eye, you want to thread that point through the needle, and then you want to twist your lace so that it makes a wee rose. Pull it through, which is actually really quite difficult. For the larger ones I needed to use pliers, and that will make your rose. Add a little bit of fabric glue, wait for it to dry, and you have a lovely little rose. So this is one of the bigger ones that I use on the pannier. But I made some teeny tiny little ones for her corset because the big ones were ginormous. So I just need to figure out where to put them. They're not exactly where they are on the show. I'm just trying to figure out where they look best for the doll, while getting the similar sort of look. But she's got quite a few more of them on her corset in the show, and they're a lot bigger with embroidery. So I just do the best I can at this scale and stitch them through the front. And she's got embroidery on there as well. So the easiest thing I thought I could do is actually paint it. I was originally only going to paint it, but it just didn't look quite right. So I'm using it as a guide to do a little bit of embroidery. Not with embroidery thread, but just regular thread, because even the regular thread at one thickness is still really noticeable at this scale. So I did that off camera with some dark grey thread and some white thread. I added the eyelets on the chest and the straps off camera, and now I'm going to paint them because they are really noticeable on this fabric. I'm just using normal white acrylic paint, and I'm going to go over it with some of the matte varnish so that hopefully it won't all chip off when I thread her corset. I don't usually do videos in parts, so I thought rather than having my usual intro, I'd just pick up right where we left off from part 1. So I'm going to start off by hot gluing the blue flowers onto Enid's pannier. Now the decorative pins I've stuck through them are still sticking out, so I'm going to use some pliers to just cut those short, and then put a blob of hot glue on the ends so that they're not sharp. Now for the shoes. So I'm using the shoes that came with the doll, and I'm just going to paint them white after spraying them with some Mr. Super Clear, because I want to paint them that nice sort of tannish colour. Now I think if you look really closely, you'll notice that Enid actually wears 2 different sets of shoes. She wears these lovely high heels, which is what I'm going to make now. You see those at the beginning, but when she's doing the actual dance, she's wearing these flat jazz shoes, because I mean, I fully expect that if she tried to dance in these, she'd turn her ankle over. Once that's all dry, I do a base coat in that nice tan colour that will go really nicely with her outfit. But, I mean, this doesn't have great coverage, so it takes several coats to get it opaque enough. The heel and bottom of the shoe that she wears is almost, the heel is see-through, it's almost like a clear plastic. So to try and get that sort of look, I'm just doing the bottom and the heels out of this sort of lovely pearlish white. And then doing another coat of the tan on the main shoe until they look like this. So they're looking pretty good, but the heel still doesn't really look translucent like the see-through plastic. So I'm doing a coat of Diamond Gloss UV nail top coat, and I'm going to cure that with my UV lamp. And once that's done, I'm going to go over it with this Aurora powder that I've got for my nails. I've started wearing longer nail extensions. I'm not wearing them at the moment, but you'll probably see them off and on throughout the video. But this stuff is just gorgeous and gives a beautiful Aurora shine. And even though it still doesn't look like see-through plastic, I just thought it would give it that something extra. So I'm really happy with how that turned out. The Aurora is on the left and the non-Aurora is on the right. And I think you can really tell the difference. Now I think they're looking super cute, but there's still a little something missing. I don't believe it was on the show, but I have these little ribbons that I bought from a little fabric shop that's not open anymore, and the colour was just perfect. I couldn't resist putting them on. Right, onto her wig. So I actually started doing some of this back in December before part 1 came out. I was madly rushing to try and get this finished. So this part of the film here is actually back in December. Unfortunately, my camera broke, so I wasn't able to finish it in time. And in a way, I'm kind of glad, because this is probably the most complicated wig I've ever made, and I've had to incorporate it into not just being a wig, but actually gluing wefts to her hair to get it looking realistic, since it's a sort of half up, half down hairstyle, which turned out to be really, really tricky. So I'm curling all this before starting her face up. I'm going to wrap it all up so it's out of the way. But I needed this done before I could actually put the wig on top of her head. So it was rather involved. So I'm glad that I had the time to give it the attention and time that it really needed, because it was so complicated. So after curling all those bits that are hanging down, I really wanted to get her parting right. So I'm just gluing some of the yarn wefts along the parting line and checking how they flip over. She's got a centre part, so at least that makes that nice and easy. But she's also got little bits of fringe hanging down. So I need to try and make that look realistic. And again, the half up, half down do was I found it quite difficult. So I'm actually using a combination, so I'm clipping here, and because I want her hair to show and have a natural realistic hairline, I'm actually gluing some of this yarn, pulling it back under the wig so that it looks like her hair is naturally just coming out of her head. So this took a lot of a lot of fandangling. I don't think I'll be doing a curly wig again for a wee while, because this was just so many ringlets. I think I've about done my dash with ringlets after this one. Instead of spraying hairspray directly on the doll, especially on the face, I like to spray it on a toothbrush and then just use that to sort of brush it flat once the parting's all done. Now, her hair sort of loops up into a ponytail, and it's all really quite loose. I don't know how else to describe it, but it definitely made this a bit of a challenge. So I'm just trying to use a combination of little ponytails and wisps of hair to try and mimic that look. You'll see me brush out some of the curls a fair bit, because looking at the reference, I realise quite often that I've made the curl clump a little bit too small and it needs to be wider. Now, it's probably a bit long-winded showing all this curling, but I wanted to show as much as possible so that hopefully it might help anyone else who ends up needing to do a complicated wig. Going back and restyling it after you've done parts because you're not happy with it, I think is a really important thing to show, because quite often, especially on YouTube, no matter what you're watching, you quite often only see the finished result and it makes it look so easy. So I really wanted to just show the parts where things weren't going to plan, like this, where the wig didn't actually come down far enough. I don't know how or why, but the wig cap was too small. So I need to actually glue parts of this directly to her head to make it look like those curls are falling from the back of her head, because you could actually see those small dots where the original doll had her rerouting. You could actually see them from the back of her head, which was not what I was going for at all. I'm also putting a couple along the hairline here that I can just whip back into the ponytail again to make it look like it's coming straight from her head and make it look like an actual hairline instead of just a wig. So I'm just gluing things and then just tentatively putting the wig on top so that I can see how that's going to roughly sit. Like this. Which looks much more natural. Okay, time to tackle the problem of her ponytail being absolutely teeny tiny. So I'm going to get some of this fluff, put it around a hair tie, and I'm going to sort of just use it as a hairpiece that's going to fit over the ponytail like this. So it's going to need some of its own wefts and ringlets to make her hair look longer. So I've done some more of those, brushed them out and flat ironed them. And I'm going to do this in a combination of ways. The first one's like this. I'm just going to tie around the hair tie like that. Then it will just nicely fit over the ponytail and make it look like her ponytail's much thicker. So I'm going to just do that a couple of times. But you can probably see that when you tie them like that, they sort of sit quite far apart. So I'm going to add some that I'm looping around and then just tying with one of those little elastic bands so that they're thicker and closer together, and we get this weird starfish looking thing. It doesn't look hilarious? Pop it on her ponytail, and yeah, she's definitely got more hair now. Not quite the look we're going for, so time for more curling. I swear to God, this took 2 days. At least 2 full days. So now that that's all done, I'm going to pin back her hair. And we can start her face up. First off, I want to neutralise some of that pink undertone of her skin. Which is fine because Enid is actually very pale. When you put her next to Jenna Ortega, she's actually got less warm tones than Jenna Ortega. I think that's good, so we'll do the first coat of Mr. Super Clear, and then I'm going to go on top with this nice skin colour Pan Pastel. Then that will be the second coat of Mr. Super Clear. And now I can finally start the face up, which I'm going to count the Mr. Super Clear layers separately. Start with the hands. I forgot to do the Pan Pastel on those, so they were still pink. I was kind of nervous about this face-up because it's actually the first one that I've done since Megan, technically, and it's on a doll that I've never done a face-up on before, with it being at a much bigger scale, so I was a bit nervous. Especially because Enid's face-up is, her makeup is very clean, so I tend to like the horror repaints because it doesn't matter if something goes wrong or is a little bit blotchy, because it totally suits the doll anyway. But with face-ups like this where it needs to be really clean, crisp, and I find those a little bit more nerve-wracking. But it was really nice to get back into it after so long. I've been looking forward to starting her face-up, and it's been frustrating having things keep popping up and preventing me from doing it. Here I just want to do some contouring with some skin colours just to give her face some more dimension. While I did the face-up, I actually also started rewatching season 2 of Wednesday, and I especially just keep looking at Bianca's ball dress, and I've kind of decided I really want, like, not necessarily in the 17-inch dolls and the normal Monster High dolls as well. I kind of want to do like Wednesday's ball dress, Bianca's ball dress, and if I can hunt down another 17-inch doll, I do want to do Agnes, because all of the costumes in that, I think it's the second to last episode, are just bloody spectacular, and I particularly love Bianca's as well. She's just gorgeous, and I think she'd make a beautiful doll. Once I get past this initial stage where you're drawing on the eyes and having to get them looking even and not looking a little bit weird with one being one size bigger than the other, I enjoy the face-ups a lot more after that stage. This is sort of my anxiety stage where I find it quite hard to get them even, and I'm constantly pausing the recording to go and ask people, like, are these eyes even? So I decided to keep that in the recording so it's a bit more realistic for those of you starting out. I don't want you to just see the things that are going right. I really want you to be able to see the things that just happen normally when you're doing an artistic hobby, like making one eye bigger than the other, which I definitely did that first time, but I think it looks a lot better now. I didn't consciously think about it at the time, but I actually found it a lot easier doing a face-up on a doll this large. Again, I wasn't consciously thinking about it at the time, but just something about it felt faster and easier. So I'd definitely be keen to find more of these big dolls, or even if I can hunt down some BJDs, or I'm still going to be working on my own so that I can eventually start making my own BJDs. So we'll see, maybe there will be some bigger dolls in the future too. I generally try and layer my face-ups, so I start off with just sketching in pencil and the lighter pencil and using pastels to build up the eyeshadow and opacity and things. But I'm trying, because it quite often ends up that I end up making more work for myself, so I'll sketch it out in pencil and things and then just end up painting over top of it, and sometimes I'll get to the end of a project and feel like, well, why didn't I just start off painting it? But drawing them straight from the pencils like this, I don't think is a skip that I could step. It definitely helps set the foundation, except I noticed here that I gave her brown eyes and it turns out she has blue eyes, so we'll be fixing that after this coat of Mr. Super Clear. Now that the eyebrows have been shaped out in pastel, I'm going over top with some wet watercolour pencils. So I just wet my paintbrush and then dab it on the pencil, and then it kind of works like paint. I like using that better than paint because it's a much thinner consistency, and unlike acrylic, if I make a mistake I can just wet a little Q-tip and just wipe it off. Especially that's why I didn't use a lot of layers of Mr. Super Clear in this face-up. I actually kind of surprised myself looking back at it. But it is helpful to be able to do more layers, because then if you do make a mistake, it definitely saves you a lot of time and potentially having to take off more than just the mistake. Other than Enid's outfit, one of the things I loved most about this particular look was her eye makeup. It's absolutely gorgeous, and it's kind of her signature combination of pink and blue, but it's more of like a turquoise blue and a sparkly pink. So I'm building up the colours with pan pastels, but again, after adding some glittery paint later, I sort of had to ask myself, well, was it worth building that up in pastels? Can you actually see it underneath? I like to think you can. Sorry, my hand keeps getting in the way. I'm not been having a hard time finding the right camera angle where you can actually see everything. It's quite tricky when your stand's on the right side. So I made her eyeliner a bit too thick here, and it didn't match the other eye, so I'm just using a very thin Q-tip and wiping it off with some water. But here's why I mentioned about having to do more layers of Mr. Super Clear, because as you can see, that wiped off a lot of the pan pastel that I'd built up there, which is a shame, but I think it was worth it because that eyeliner really was a lot thicker. So I'm just going to try and build that pastel up again. I find drawing on the doll just straight with the watercolour pencil doesn't get the vibrancy that I like, so I'm going over the waterline and everything also with the wet watercolours, and same with her eyes, which is where it feels kind of like making more work for yourself, but then at the same time I do need those guides, I think, just with the normal pencil so that I know what I'm doing when I wet my paintbrush and go in with the wet watercolours. I'm just giving her lips some really fine lines. I don't want them too obvious, especially with the white, or they can look not quite right. Okay, let's fix her eye colour because she's definitely got blue eyes. I'm going over with some pan pastel, and that didn't actually really change the colour much, so I'm going back in with my wet watercolours and I'm going to just directly paint on the eye. I think it will get much better saturation, and it's what I'm probably going to do anyway, even if I did use the pastel and then spray it with Mr. Super Clear. So I figured let's just skip the pastel and go straight with the wet watercolour. I'm using my very, very fine brush and just doing a bunch of lines in and around the iris, the pupil, and the outer part of the iris to try and get all the little colours that you see inside eyes. I've got a reference of blue eyes up on my phone that I'm watching while I do this, because references are very important. In the reference I was using, there was actually a very thin line around the pupil of an almost light brown, so I added that as well. And I think it looks quite nice. Just a bit of dimension. And so I'm going back over with some black pan pastel over her pupil and around the outsides of her eye with my really teeny tiny brush. I do admit that normally I would do a coat of Mr. Super Clear between that stage and this stage, but I'm on less than half a can and I have no idea when more was coming in stock at the time. As of doing the voiceover, they have finally got it in stock after about 8 months. So I've got 4 cans on the way, but I didn't know that at the time, so I was trying to limit my use of Mr. Super Clear. Now I'm just going to keep using that black pan pastel and add some shading around her eyeball to give it some dimension and make it look a little bit more realistic. Not everyone does this with their doll face-ups, but I personally like it for mine. I just think it makes them look a little bit more real, and I enjoy doing it. She's got some lovely shimmery makeup as well, so I'm just going over this with a wet brush and some Pearl-Ex powder. So here's a close-up of how the eyes are looking. After giving the lips a little Pearl-Ex, I'll do another spray of Mr. Super Clear. And now I can go in with the highlights. I do insist on doing a layer of Mr. Super Clear before doing highlights because there will always be parts that I end up erasing. And there's no way I want to do that on an eyeball full of reactive watercolour that can reactivate. I always love adding the highlights the most because it just brings a project to life and it's so satisfying. Same with adding the highlights along the waterline. I just think it makes the eyes look so cute. And even if you don't end up glossing them, it makes them look wet and shiny. Now I'm going to add some of that glittery eyeshadow. In this case, I'm using some paint that I got from Tom's Emporium. And it looks so nice. I got some in turquoise as well, because it's all got the built-in superfine glitter. And again, I don't know if the pan pastel helps with the opacity of this, but I'm so happy with how it came out, especially because she's got a little bit of the blue right at the wing of her eyeliner. So I'm glad that that was actually visible, because I was afraid that it wasn't going to stand out at all. Now I'm just dipping my paintbrush in some of the glue part of the glitter glue and adding some like tiny little nail art glitter along the bottom of her eye, because she's got some lovely shimmery glitter under her eye as well, and I think it will just brighten her whole face up. So now we've done our final coat of Mr. Super Clear, so now I can gloss her lips and her eyes. I was kind of debating whether to gloss her eyes or not, because I know that it photographs a lot better, but it just doesn't feel complete without glossing the eyes for me. So I'm doing that with some Liquitex high gloss varnish, and I'll have to wait 3 to 4 hours between layers. Now for her eyelashes. I've been looking forward to this because it's such a bigger doll. It means that I won't need to trim the eyelashes down quite as much. So I'll be doing upper lashes and lower lashes, which I don't often get to do for the smaller dolls. I'm still going to do what I normally do and add a bit of Elmer's glue along the lash line, just because I normally trim down the band that the eyelashes are attached to, because they're really thick and it's not the best look on a doll unless it's got inset eyes. So I'm going to start with the lower lashes first because they're much easier. And off camera I did her long eyelashes because they took a little bit of maneuvering and it was very hard to get on camera. My hand was in the way half the time. I just used my tweezers to sort of get away any of the excess glue there. But I'm also going to glue 3 little dots and put some little sparklies right along her winged eyeliner, because if you look very, very closely at her makeup in the show, she's actually got these 3 little bits of glitter along her eye. Well, I think in her case they're diamantes, but at this scale they're going to be glitter. So that's how it's looking there. It's so cute. I'm so happy with how it came out. Although the glue is still a little bit obvious, so I'm just going to paint over where the eyelashes have been glued with some black paint, just to make that less visible. And it's just a really small detail, but I think it makes a huge difference. See, I haven't done the left eye yet, and you can kind of notice it compared to the right. So I'll do that on the left as well. And now for her fingernails. I was going to give her the really long claws, but for most of the time she's wearing the dress, she's actually got her normal human nails. And if you look closely, they've got this sort of glitter on them. But at this scale, I don't think I could make that visible, so I just did teeny tiny little black dots instead. And then went over them with some Liquitex high gloss varnish. And after months of work on her outfit and her hair and everything else, her face up is finally done. So I can finally unwrap her. Just a wee note for people who do reroots and things, for the dolls this size, their head, the vinyl on their heads is so thick, and after so many layers of Mr. Super Clear, these pins were so hard to get out. So maybe have a pair of pliers handy. Golly, she looks like one of those Benedictine monks that have the top of their heads shaved. We can fix this. Now, let's see how it's looking with the face. Oh, she's gonna look so cute. Right, let's get styling. So I've got to put these bits up first to go into her ponytail. I've got these bits here to cover. You can see here where the reroot was, which I don't really want visible. So I'm going to bring some of that hair down so that I can incorporate it into one of the ringlets. Just the main goal here is to cover up as much of those reroot holes as possible, even if it means gluing more hair to her head, which I think is what I'm going to have to do. Which was a little bit annoying because it meant that I had to wait another day for the glue to completely dry. So here I'd put this day aside to complete the wig, and instead I had to glue some hair to it and pretty much strike off the rest of that day for doll work until tomorrow. But I think it's definitely worth the wait to have the wig looking better. Okay, now that it's dry, I can whip those bits into her ponytail, and I'm just trying to keep them as loose as possible because she's sort of got those wisps going up into the ponytail in the show. So again, I'm trying to keep things as close as possible, but I have to relent that at this scale it's hard to get it looking the same as it would on a human-sized person. And I could still see some of the reroot at the bottom of the wig, so I had to glue some more hair in. So I'm just going to work that into this ringlet here, because I realised I've got probably a lot more ringlets than she actually had, so I'm going to try and combine a few of them so that they don't look quite as many. I can't quite remember what video it was on, but a lovely subscriber recommended using the metal end of a comb like this to do the curling, so I've been trying that for this lot of curling compared to what I was using back in December, and it worked so well. So thank you so much for whoever recommended that. It's saved me so much time, and it's a lot longer, so it made the curling process a lot easier for me, so thank you. Okay, I think that about does it for the curls. Get the extension and pop it on her ponytail. It really does make her ponytail look less teeny. It's probably a bit more than what's on the show, but I think it suits the size of the doll's head. Oh, it looks so cute and curly. I'm so happy with how it came out. So now that everything's finished, I'm going to put some fabric glue on the extension. And this was really nerve-wracking because I didn't want to get it anywhere else. So we're going to pop it over the ponytail. And yes, I did get it on some of it. God darn it. So I'm just quickly wiping that off and floofing it out. And just holding that in place while the glue sets. I'm also just going to trim a little stray hairs and keep that in position with a few of these little pins, which were so hard to get through her thick vinyl head, but I don't want that wig shifting, so it's going to not only keep the extension in place but also the entire wig, because it's as you can imagine, it's quite heavy. And that is her wig all done. Finally, I've been waiting since December to see how this is going to turn out. I'm so happy with it, although I think there's something missing. She's got butterflies in her hair in the show, so see, right here, she's got some little blue monarchs. I almost forgot. Okay, so let's make some of those quickly. Abra, cadabra. I made these just out of some cardboard and some of the holographic paper. Just wedged them between all the butterflies. So now she is done, and we can finally put her all together and see how she looks in her outfit. Oh my gosh, this corset is never coming off again. This was so hard to lace. I've recently gotten back into wanting to sew my own clothes, so I've actually got a pattern for a corset like this, so it's so tempting to try and make this outfit for myself. And she is done. I think she's probably my most favourite doll that I've ever made, and I love all the dolls I've made, but I'm just so happy with how she came out. I hope you enjoyed the video. So sorry that it was a bit longer than between the part 1. If you liked it, please don't forget to give it a like, and if you enjoy this type of content, please feel free to subscribe, and I will see you next time for a horror repaint from a Korean drama series. See you next time. Bye!